Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report, and in this programme today we'll be talking about one of Israel's national emergency services, that is Magen David Adom, in saving lives in Israel, but also the exciting news that they have completed their brand new National Blood Centre. Warm welcome to the programme, and today's special guest is all the way from North London. He's a friend of this programme and a great friend of mine and to the Christian community. Stephen Jaffe, you really need no introduction, do you, my friend?
Well, thank you, Simon, for having me on the programme. It's a great privilege always to be on Revelation TV, but to be representing an organisation like Magen David Adom is a huge privilege, so thank you so much.
No, you don't have to thank me. And we end up sharing a lot of speaking platforms and speaking engagements. Our last one was down in Poole, at the theatre in Poole, which was great. You gave a fantastic talk warning about the dangers and the rise of Jew hatred in this country, and how evangelical Christians have to be very vigilant regarding that and to support and encourage the Jewish community. So it's great to have you on the Middle East Report again, talking about MDA. So can you give us an update on some of the work that you've been doing for MDA and a general update on the situation in the UK regarding Magen David Adom UK?
Well, like so many things, so many areas of life, it's been a difficult few years with the lockdown, and it has been wonderful to see the return of in-person events. And yes, you and I, Simon, down there at Poole, a night to honour Israel at the Lighthouse, the main cultural centre down there. It was excellent just to be with friends of Israel once again. So over the last few months, I've been back on the road, Poole in the south of England, up to Peterhead in northeast Scotland, really engaging with supporters of Magen David Adom that we haven't been able to meet face to face for quite a while. But delighted to say that the support is still there, the interest is still there, and I'm just back from an event that the whole Jewish community put on, which is a very small community, one of the smallest Jewish communities in the UK, but they put on an afternoon tea for MDA. So it's wonderful to have these events back, bringing both Jewish and Christian supporters, bringing back the awareness through face-to-face contact and ability to reach out. So that's what's been happening over the last few weeks.
Fabulous. And can you just share with us, I mean, you mentioned now that we seem to be at the tail end of COVID-19, the pandemic that has caused a very 2 years. It stopped speaking engagements, it stopped flights to Israel. How is MDA UK now progressing now kind of post-COVID in terms of drumming up support for the organisation and the vital work they do in saving lives in Israel, but also not only that, but also connecting people again, Christians and Jews that have a love for Israel, and helping Israelis, and maybe the best way they can do that is through the work of MDA.
Well, absolutely, all of those things are crucially important. Difficult times economically, it's very difficult for charities in such a climate. But I think for so many of our supporters, they understand that when the going gets tough economically, that's actually a time to increase giving, if anything. And we've seen that quite remarkably in some of our fundraising, that people understand that Magen David Adom is a frontline organisation, certainly during the pandemic. It was the organisation that was responsible for so much testing in Israel, COVID testing, and of course transporting patients. So it's a frontline organisation dealing with humanitarian need, and I think people understand that the importance of that continues irrespective of the economic or political climate. So in that sense, I think people have remained outstandingly generous and supportive, but it has been tough, and I think the economic climate is only going to get tougher. But we're blessed, I think, with a support base that understands that requires us to step forward in terms of practical support. So you mentioned also people visiting Israel again. So it's an amazing opportunity that people have going back to Israel, to actually visit Magen David Adom, to actually visit one of the ambulance stations, to even do a shift on the back of an ambulance. That's really the best way that people can understand the significance of that organisation to the state of Israel, to all the people who live there, so that coming back to Israel on journeys and trips, and it's a huge opportunity, which I'm delighted to say Magen David Adom is really up for in terms of engaging with people coming to the land.
And of course, what makes I think MDA UK or Magen David Adom so unique amongst all the kind of national ambulances around the world, including the great work that the NHS does with our ambulance services, is that they have to deal with routine medical emergencies, road accidents, but also potentially rocket attacks, missile attacks, terrorism incidents, even the potential of threat of war, that Israel is always not that far away from a major military confrontation. So, which makes them pretty unique, don't they, in terms of paramedics and how they are prepared to deal with conflict and conflict situations.
Absolutely, and I think something that will surprise a lot of viewers is that Magen David Adom is overwhelmingly a volunteer organisation. In other words, I think about 80% of the personnel of Magen David Adom, they're not paid. They do it on a voluntary basis. So this is a situation where you mentioned terrorist attacks, and sadly we've seen that quite recently in Israel. So you would have a situation where an MDA team would have to travel into an area of intense danger. You wouldn't know whether all the terrorists had been dealt with, whether there was still somebody there with a gun, and volunteers would have to go into a place where there had been loss of life, tremendous fear, and yet those are volunteers doing that, which goes to say something about the calibre of people over there, that's something that they volunteer for. So that's absolutely right. Another thing that MDA has to be geared up, which you didn't mention, is earthquakes, as if Israel didn't have enough situations. Yes, conflict and terrorism and all the routine medical emergencies, but Israel is on an earthquake zone. And that's something which Magen David Adom has to take extremely seriously, because it would be the frontline response to that. So on all fronts, it's an organisation of vital importance to the state of Israel.
And can you share with us, Stephen, how, for example, Barbara and Mark from Christian Friends of Magen David Adom UK have been able to help assist the work of MDA, and the difference that has made having a Christian component to the work of MDA?
It's a long-standing component of MDA. It's part and parcel of MDA UK, part and parcel of the MDA family. You mentioned Reverend Madeley, he's Vice President. Barbara Dingle is on the Board of Trustees. So they have senior leadership positions, and their advice and guidance is absolutely central to the organisation. In addition, we've got Christian representatives in the north of the country, in the south. That's Angela and Jackie, who I know would be well known to many viewers. So that part and parcel, and the organisation Christian Friends of Magen David Adom, it's been around for a number of years. Its initial hope, its aspiration, its dream and prayer was to sponsor an ambulance. It's gone so far beyond that in sponsoring so many different ambulances. In Jerusalem, there's a wonderful little vehicle. Do you ever wonder how you could get an ambulance through the old city of Jerusalem?
I've seen them.
And up and down the steps and all the rest of it. Sponsored by Christian Friends of Magen David Adom. So that's just one example. I know we're going to be talking about the National Blood Centre there. The main escalator in the National Blood Centre, so with all the footfall of people going through, sponsored by Christian Friends, and that's so important for the Israeli population to see that. You know, when an ambulance is sponsored by Christian Friends of Magen David Adom, it says that both in Hebrew and in English, so that the Israeli people can see that there are Christian people who are standing beside them, wishing to provide practical assistance. And that is a very powerful witness from the Christian world to Israel. So it's absolutely fundamental to the organisation.
Excellent. I mean, share with us this exciting news about Israel's National Blood Centre that is now opened. I think it's centred in the centre of the country. Cost over $135 million to build. But according to the Times of Israel, it's the safest blood centre anywhere in the world, that it's deep underground and it's bomb-proof and also earthquake-proof. Can you share with us the urgent need there was to have a new blood centre in Israel to protect Israel's vital blood supplies and why it's so important?
So on the last trip that I made to Israel with Magen David Adom, we visited the existing facility, which is Tel HaShomer near Tel Aviv, and then immediately went to the new centre, which is in Ramla, which is very close to Ben Gurion Airport. And you could see that the existing facility was teetering. You know, it was probably fit for purpose 15, 20 years ago, but now was bursting at the seams. But much more important than that was the point that you've made, that it was a above ground building. If a missile was to strike it, it could wipe out the facilities there. Magen David Adom is responsible for well over 90% of all the blood which is donated and processed and distributed, and that centre was of huge strategic importance to Israel. So this new building, which is very expensive, state-of-the-art, big enough for Israel with its expanding population. Let's not forget that a facility in Israel that's maybe 20 or 30 years old was dealing with a population of maybe 4 or 5 million, and now the population is in excess of 9 million. So there's always a need to grow and expand, but that vulnerability also to earthquakes, which I've mentioned, of the older building, meant that it was vitally important. And what a privilege for both the Jewish world, Jewish friends of Israel, Christian friends of Israel, to support Magen David Adom to ensure that this new facility is state-of-the-art, and it really is. And again, for people who come and visit Israel, take an hour or two of your itinerary and go and visit it. And I think your heart will swell with pride that this is a state-of-the-art facility that Israel should be proud of, and indeed all of us who've contributed in whatever way to Magen David Adom, that it's at the very best. And I think that's amazing. And it's of importance globally, because Israel, won't surprise you, when it comes to collecting blood types, will collect the rarest of blood types because of the makeup of the population there, Jews returning from all over the world, various the Arab communities, etc. There's lots of rare blood, and so Israel donates that blood wherever it's needed. So it's of global importance. There's a lot of cooperation, for instance, between the blood service in the UK and Israel. So it is of global as well as huge national importance. And yes, how wonderful to see this building, which is now completed and will soon be operational.
Excellent. So let's have a look at this excellent video produced by American friends of MDA, looking at this new National Blood Centre that has just recently opened in Israel.
Few things are as important to the health of a nation as its blood supply. And nowhere is that more true than in Israel, because today, blood is used for so many life-saving treatments, providing seriously ill patients with antibodies to fight coronavirus, giving transplant and cardiac patients the ability to undergo life-saving surgery, and providing terror victims and IDF soldiers with the red blood cells and platelets they need to survive critical injuries. Israel's National Blood Services Center was built in 1987 by American donors to Magen David Adom, Israel's national emergency medical service. But more than 35 years later, Israel is a very different country. Israel has grown from a country of about 4.4 million people when the blood center was built to one with more than 9 million people, and its population is expected to grow to more than 10 million people by 2030. So it now needs a blood center with significantly larger processing capacity, requiring that Israel upgrade from a blood center that processes 260,000 units of blood a year to one that can process more than 500,000. And while Israel's population has grown, so has something else: the capacity of Israel's enemies. Israel's most belligerent enemies, Hezbollah on Israel's northern borders and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, didn't have rockets capable of reaching Magen David Adom's blood center near Tel Aviv when the center was first built. But now, both Hezbollah and Hamas have rockets and missiles capable of hitting targets virtually anywhere in Israel. And that leaves millions of Israelis and the blood supply vulnerable to attack. That's why Israel needs a new blood services center, one with not only greater blood processing capacity, but also reinforced against attack, with its most crucial services, such as blood storage and processing, underground in reinforced areas of the building and out of harm's way. This will ensure that Israeli civilians and soldiers will have the blood they need when they need it most. And with Israel sitting on 2 seismic fault lines, the new blood center also needs to meet current building codes to withstand the earthquake we know will inevitably hit the area. American supporters of Israel built the current blood center. Likewise, American friends of Magen David Adom made the decision to build Israel's new blood services center to leverage American support for Israel and to ensure the safety of Israel's blood supply for many decades to come. The new facility will be called the Marcus National Blood Services Center in recognition of a $25 million gift toward its construction by the Marcus Foundation and Bernie and Billy Marcus. It's being built in Ramla, centrally located near Israel's highways, to ensure rapid deployment to the nation's hospitals. And because of the urgent need for this new facility, AFMDA has worked to ensure the construction timeline has been strictly adhered to. The Marcus National Blood Services Center is a 550,000 square foot structure consisting of 6 floors, 3 of them underground and in mostly shielded areas, protected against rocket attacks and chemical and biological threats. When completed, this will be Israel's only national blood services center. Currently, this is one of the largest capital projects in all of Israel. Because of the importance of the project to Israel's national security, this building is being constructed in coordination with the Prime Minister's Office, the National Security Agency, and the Israeli Defense Forces. Upon completion, this will be the only blood center in the world that will comply with GMP regulations and be shielded. The Marcus National Blood Services Center is designed to collect 500,000 units of blood a year, compared to the 260,000 units the current blood center was designed for. The center will produce 2,200 units a day in normal operations and can produce more than 3,500 during times of war to ensure IDF soldiers have the blood they need when they need it. By completing this project together, we can help ensure Israel's future.
And the great news is that Israel's new National Blood Centre was opened in the beginning of May by the new Israeli president, so it's now operational. Extraordinary to think that the National Blood Centre in where it's located in Ramah, Stephen, was one of the biggest building projects in Israel. So the fact that this has to be coordinated with MDA, who clearly in charge of the project, in charge of the blood, but the Prime Minister's office, the National Security Office for Israel, and also the IDF were also very interested to be involved in this. Shows the importance of blood to Israel. Can you share to our viewers why Israel needs so much supply of blood, particularly as we see that Israel could be involved in a major regional war, and this is when this blood centre will come into its own? Absolutely.
So I think that you put your finger on it. It's of strategic importance. We perhaps don't really think about that in terms of what it is that protects Israel in times of war. We think obviously of the army and the armed services and the air force, etc. But you need to have a blood supply that can deal with casualties. That's vital, obviously, and that is why this new project has brought in all the various agencies that you've mentioned. It's hard to exaggerate the strategic importance of the installation and the fact that we could support it as Friends of Israel living overseas, that we had that opportunity to show our practical support for something of that magnitude. I think it's very significant, and as I've said, Christian donations are absolutely centre there. When people will be using the main escalator, it will be clear that Christian friends from around the world have supported it. So, we talk about the lifeblood of any organism or organisation. This is the lifeblood of Israel. And so it is, I think, a wonderful thing that it has come to completion in terms of the build, and that we all had a part, big or small, in this new installation.
And of course, we saw in that excellent presentation by American friends of MDA of how this National Blood Centre had to be built underground, because I think according to the last one, when the bombs went off, it was very difficult then to move all the blood down into the bomb shelters, knowing that all it needs is for one stray missile to hit that building, and Israel's main supply of blood is depleted, it's gone, which then puts the whole security of the nation under threat. So clearly, as we mentioned earlier, this is a strategic threat, but also shows you the threats that Israel faces, doesn't it, from the likes of the Islamist terrorist organisation Hamas in Gaza, and that from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and that in any future war that Israel faces will be probably a horrendous missile war.
Well, absolutely, and it's something which I think many people who are not perhaps even critical of Israel, hostile of Israel, should actually bear in mind. We're seeing what's happening in Ukraine right now in terms of warfare. Israel is a tiny country. It's a fraction of the size of Ukraine. It has no strategic depth whatsoever, and terrorist organizations on the borders can strike any part of Israel. No part is beyond their range. That makes the country vulnerable. It makes the civilian population very vulnerable, and people should perhaps bear that in mind when Israel has to deal with its security, the protection of its citizens. I think in this country and in many parts of the world, people are rushed to criticise. Israel's overreacting is something that I've often heard. It's disproportionate in its responses. That's you could go right across our political establishment, and everyone has said that. Perhaps they should put themselves in the actual position of Israel, a tiny country which is extremely vulnerable to all means of attacks against its population.
Absolutely, and we need to remind our politicians that Israel doesn't reside in Europe or North America. So Israel's borders are very fragile, particularly if we look at, for example, in southern Lebanon, Israel's border with Lebanon, for example, the Islamist Iranian-backed terrorist organisation Hezbollah have something in the region of 180,000 rockets aimed at Israel, plus also with them wanting to transfer laser-guided missiles through the Iranian regime through to Syria. To Hezbollah also poses as a threat. Plus also we see that the rockets and missiles that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad pose as well. And we've seen the absolute devastation that those rockets and missiles caused in recent conflicts over Israel, paralysing the nation. So in the last conflict against Hamas, 2/3 of Israel's population was paralysed. No one could go to school, no one could go to work. Everyone had to be within 10 seconds of a bomb shelter. And you can't, as a state, you can't live like that.
Absolutely, and you make the point in Europe. We've perhaps forgotten that, but I think what's happening in Ukraine is reminding many governments that they need to prepare for this as well. I mean, it's what's happening in recent times in Europe is a wake-up call, and Israel, of course, has so much to give in terms of its experience, in terms of its expertise. Nowhere, I would say, more so than Magen David Adom, and its ability to respond to these kind of huge threats is something which other countries in Europe increasingly, I think, are aware that they need to learn from. So I take your point entirely.
But isn't it incredible, just seeing that one video alone, how Israel responds to new threats and new challenges through innovation? So we see there Israel's old National Blood Centre in Tel Aviv. Right, we now face rockets and missile threats from Hezbollah in the north and from Hamas in the south. One of these rockets or missiles could land on our National Blood Centre, and that would destroy Israel's supply of blood. And in any major conflict that Israel would engage after that, it would be devastating and a massive load of casualties, because there wouldn't be the blood to help those injured Israeli soldiers. So let's think how we can get around that by building a national blood centre deep underground that is not only rocket proof but also earthquake proof as well. Shows, doesn't it, the strategic thinking behind a lot of Israel's leaders, and MDA deserves a lot of credit from this. But what do you think other governments around the world will be learning from Israel's experience? Because when it's Israel dealing with these things, they have so much to teach the world, whether it's through medicine, emergency services, security, innovation, startup nation. The world is looking to Israel for answers.
Absolutely. Israel has what other countries need, whether to add to the list that you've given there: cybersecurity, intelligence, just basic intelligence of knowing what's going on in that region. So Israel does have a lot. I'm glad to say that Magen David Adom, in the field of humanitarian relief, which is what it does, is exporting that knowledge and technology. So, for example, during the COVID crisis, the Magen David Adom had state-of-the-art testing, drive-in testing, and they exported that to around the world. So, for instance, in Central Africa, countries there were dependent and relying and looking at what Israel was doing. So that process of sharing its technology, sharing the know-how, is something which I think Israel is becoming, I think countries around the world are seeing is the value of having good relations with Israel. And to an extent that's crossing political divides. I mean, Sweden would be a country that wouldn't have been known as being great friends of Israel. And yet there's coming and going now between Sweden and Israel to share this kind of knowledge and expertise. So I think you're right, and I'm glad to say that Magen David Adom does its bit on the kind of humanitarian relief, because it's needed. You know, whether there's a volcano in Guatemala or a earthquake in Haiti or a tsunami in Indonesia, it's MDA that's the first organisation to go in there, and it's affiliated to the International Red Cross movement, but it's coming from a small country in global terms. And yet, it goes way beyond what you might expect from a small country in the Eastern Mediterranean to reaching out across the world wherever there is need. So I'm proud to say Magen David Adom is doing that, has a proud record across the world in terms of sharing what it's learnt and the technology as well.
Yeah. And Stephen, how significant was it that the new Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, who you know and who you hosted in Britain and also Ireland when he was the chairman of the Jewish Agency before he became president, that's always a smart move on your part, opened the Israel's National Blood Centre back in early May of this year?
Well, again, I think it shows that this was not a kind of a marginal event, the opening of the blood centre. It was of national importance. I mean, I think in the UK we perhaps are guilty of taking things like the blood service for granted. We don't see it as being of such strategic importance. In Israel, there's no illusion. They didn't realise that it is vital for all the reasons that we've mentioned, and just the everyday use of blood. We could all need it, you know, God forbid, in the context of either illness or accident. The fact that Israel is top-notch, has the best facilities now, is a matter of pride, and I'm not surprised at all that Isaac Herzog wanted to be associated with something which, as you said, the largest capital project in Israel, but also of such significance strategically.
And talking about other issues, which when we think of the crisis in the Ukraine with the unprovoked Russian invasion of the Ukraine, we don't often think of Magen David Adom's response to that, but we know that they've set up field hospitals, for example, in Moldova, to help the Ukrainian refugees flee the terror and the violence and the war in their own country, and to have that medical facilities ready to help them in Moldova and other countries is quite amazing. So can you explain how MDA is helping beyond Israel and actually helping the nations, particularly nations involved in conflict, particularly the situation in the Ukraine?
So as I've said, they have a record of global support wherever there is humanitarian need. And I think as friends of Israel, I think we all take pride when we see the Red Star of David flying alongside the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. Wherever humanitarian need exists, Magen David Adom is prepared to go. And as I've said, it's a small affiliate of the International Red Cross movement, but it is at the forefront of wherever needed. So it's not a surprise that they are active both in the Ukraine, but also with the field hospital in Moldova. And they do so as proudly part of the International Red Cross movement. And it's humanitarian. It's not about taking sides in this. I've mentioned, for instance, that Magen David Adom was active in Indonesia following a tsunami. Now, Indonesia does not have any diplomatic relations with Israel. It doesn't come into the calculation. If there is need and the country is prepared to enable MDA to arrive, it will go irrespective of the politics of the situation. So again, I think, out of this terrible humanitarian disaster in Ukraine, we can be proud that the Red Star of David is there doing its bit to alleviate human suffering.
Excellent. So let's have a look at this excellent CBN news item that looks at how MDA are responding to the crisis in the Ukraine by setting up field hospitals in Moldova.
Among those who have fled the war in Ukraine are Jewish people on their way back here to Israel. Joining me now is CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl, who just returned from a trip with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews to Moldova. Tell us, Julie, what was it like there on the border?
Well, oddly enough, Chris, it was pretty quiet when we were there. It was almost surrealistic. You look across the river and there's Ukraine, and it's beautiful and quaint and quiet. And there's a war going on there. In fact, at one point we actually heard sirens coming, but they were coming from a distance. There were about 350,000 refugees that have crossed the border into Moldova in the last weeks. It's a country of less than 3 million people, and it's one of the poorest countries in Europe, and they've absorbed 10% of their population or more than that. So it's been, quite something for them, and they're just waiting to see if there's going to be another wave.
One of the questions I have when I see these refugees, whatever country they're in, is where do they take a shower? Where do they get a meal? Where do they go to the bathroom? Just the basic human needs that people have every day that we take it for granted, but these people are refugees.
When they first come across the border, there are aid organizations, there are people there are people with buses. It's basically aid organizations from around the world that are taking care of these people. If they're Jewish people coming in, they've most likely been connected to the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, who are, starting to coordinate things for them. So they're waiting for them with a bus or whatever. They're taking them to Chisinau, which is the capital of Moldova. And there, the first place they go is either the consulate, or one of the places we visited was called the Hub. And it was a tennis court, a tennis center, and the city donated it to them. The local Jewish community and the IFCJ, the foreign ministry, the Jewish agency, they all got together there. The people are processed. There's a system they go through, and then they're waiting. And from there, they're taken to either there's a big warehouse that one of the Jewish community members donated for this cause. Aid groups put down mattresses for the people, or they're just sleeping, 50 people in a room. And they have bathrooms there, and they're being fed, and they have medical attention. When we were at the Hub, one man had a heart attack, And the Magen David Adom, Israel's emergency services, was right on hand to help him. He actually happened to be somebody from the local Jewish community who was trying to help the other people.
Right.
But anyway, and his
So
life
they saved
was
his life.
They did. They absolutely did.
So that's what it was like in the capital. You also came back with them on the flight. What was that like?
I just mentioned to you, like some of the people that we met there. We met Ludmila and her family. They had escaped Donetsk in 2014, and now they were fleeing Mariupol. And they've lost everything twice. You know, it was Ludmila, she's 47, her mother, Tatiana, and her 16-year-old son, who she credited for getting them out and encouraged him, we have to leave, we have to leave. He found a way when they had lost electricity and all communications. The building next to them was bombed, and he found a way to make a phone call, get a friend to come and pick them up, and they could get out. When we were interviewing Ludmila and her family, my cameraman Yehuda just broke down crying because he was looking at this little girl and he was thinking about his kids at home, what it would be like without a father. We have these two Holocaust survivors, Vera and Zinovi. Zinovi was 86 years old. He just had his 86th birthday under fire, you know, under bombings. And here he is. They had both run away from Ukraine as children with their families, come back and spent their whole lives there, and now we're having to flee a second time.
Julie, you know, we've reported on Jews coming back from all corners of the world for many years, and usually it's a joyful time, and it's also a prophetic time. So how did you see this in light of the scriptures?
So it was prophetic. Like you said, it wasn't so happy. People are still in shock. There were 112 people and 9 pets on our flight, including Zinovi was with us, and also Ludmila and her family were with us on the flight. It's going to be tough for them, but this is where they belong. And I think, you know, they will feel settled here. You know, like as we said earlier, there's a lot of things going on in Israel right now, but at least here, this is where they belong. This is their home, and this is where they'll be.
Yeah, even in the joyous times and sometimes the
right.
perilous times, it's prophecy unfolding. Julie, thank you, and so glad you and Yehuda went there to Moldova and was able to report on this really prophetic event and historic event.
Hello everyone, my name is Chaim Levin. I'm a medical supervisor at Magen David Adom. This is our clinic here in Chisinau, Moldova. This is clinic working at a refugee camp, refugee center that built the Jewish community here in Moldova. This is our clinic helping to a lot of refugees that coming every day here by buses from Ukraine. They came after a long journey. Some of them coming after 5 days of journey, some of them after 12 hours, and they come here exhausted and in bad shape and medical condition that they need some treatment. Some of them need a medical treatment like drugs, medications, and procedures. Some of them need to refill their medication because they get empty and they need to refill the chronic medication for their chronic problems. So this our clinic. We have here a lot of staff. We have here a pediatrician. We have here a family MD doctors. We have paramedics here, and we giving them effective and good treatment. And after we finish, they go back to their journey to the destination where they choose.
And it's great to see MDA there working where it's needed in Moldova, helping Ukrainian refugees. And then we had a representative of MDA speaking about what they are doing to help Ukrainian immigrants flee the war in the Ukraine by setting up medical hospitals and field hospitals, which is incredible. And that's one thing I love about MDA and MDA UK is that if there's a major crisis anywhere around the world, and if you are in a crisis, I can't think of anyone more that you want than to have Israelis helping you. Just that generosity of heart and wanting to make a difference, to go out there and help these Ukrainians, particularly providing urgent medical attention, knowing the horrendous situation that we see on our TV screens in Ukraine with the awful Russian invasion of that independent sovereign nation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a small country with a small affiliate to the International Red Cross, but it's there, and it's always, always seems to be the first one in. I remember earthquake in Haiti, MDA setting up field hospitals there. It can be anything, and they have the ability. I think it's what you said, Simon, about the blood centre. They have a problem with the blood centre, the existing one. It's not fit for purpose, it's vulnerable. They don't just kind of muddle on and put a sticking plaster over it, which is what perhaps other countries might do. They think, well, it needs a radical solution, and bang, they go for something really, really cutting edge. And I think it's that can-do spirit which accounts for the fact that MDA will just set off and go to places as soon as it's needed, not waiting for kind of official bureaucracy and protocols, but the can-do attitude, which is vital in an emergency situation where often you have very little time. There's an earthquake, buildings collapse. Arriving in a week's time isn't going to help. You have to be there immediately, and I think that is something that Israel at its best excels at, and Magen David Adom certainly has exemplified that.
Yeah, and I'd like to follow on from what you said, really, that Israel is a small country but with a big heart.
I think that's true. That's the only way you could sustain that kind of willingness to go to countries that perhaps even hostile to you, because you see human need. And Magen David Adom has shown that. It has, for example, long-term relationship with the Jordanian Red Crescent. This has nothing to do with politics, it's to do with humanitarian need. And Jordanian paramedics have been trained in Israel. So that's an important aspect where it's going beyond the politics, different faith, different outlooks. There's a need and there's a heart there to enable it to happen when called upon.
Absolutely. We have to discuss Daniel Burgess, been on this programme a few times, the CEO of MDA UK, has been instrumental, involved in a partnership with Virgin Atlantic to bring to the UK a large number of Ukrainian orphans fleeing the war.
Well, absolutely. So this was MDA UK, which, we are a support outfit for MDA in Israel. We channel support to that organisation, we raise funds, but this was a wonderful example where MDA UK could show initiative. We were approached with a situation, I think it was a Scottish charity that was looking after these children that got out of Ukraine, what was going to happen to them. MDA called all sorts of favours from all sorts of people, including, as you mentioned, the airlines, Virgin. These children needed picked up from Poland. And Virgin doesn't fly to Poland. It's got no history of flying to Warsaw. And yet they wanted to assist, and Magen David Adom UK was the conduit there between the airlines, getting the children to the UK, making sure that all the various governments involved, which was both Ukrainian, Polish and British. So a lot of bureaucracy to deal with. But thankfully those children were brought to the UK, and it was, in numbers term, small, but a big gesture, I think. And I think all of MDA UK supporters, Jewish, Christian, whatever, can take pride that we we stepped up to a mark when this particular issue was brought to our attention, and thankfully it was successful, and these children are now in safety in the UK.
Fabulous, and also getting some TV coverage out of it as well, which is also really good to raise the profile of MDA. Stephen, both you and I have a love for football, a passion for football. I know that you're a big supporter of Northern Ireland football team, and I love the England team. So let's have a look at this excellent MDA video that looks at how MDA have helped an Israeli football fan go and watch his beloved Maccabi Haifa play, but this is a surprise trip, so take a look.
מתי אתה הולך לשחק כדורגל? מכבי חיפה עניינים? יום שני אני בסר יופי, זהו. סגור. יום שני אתה... אם אתה צריך הסעה תתקשר אלינו, כן? מעניינים, מה קורה? איך מרגש? בסדר. זוכר אותנו?
למה ראיתי אותך כבר, כן.
כן, באנו לבקר.
נכון, מה שלומכם, בסדר?
נכון, בסדר, איך אתה?
אני בסדר, עוד חושב.
כן?
אתה מרגיש?
אתה מוכן לסיבוב?
כן.
יאללה, נראה לי אתה מתרגש.
יאללה, שלא תעקרו
שלא
למשחק.
תתרגש, זה אותו הרכב שתוכל להסתכל עליו בפנים.
הוא לא הפסיק
אותו
לדבר
דבר.
על מכבי חיפה.
אין בעיה, תודה. בשביל זה
הוא לא
אנחנו
הפסיק
לוקחים אותו
לחלום על
עכשיו.
המשחק הזה.
מצוין.
אני אמרתי לך שאני אלך, נכון?
יאללה ניצחון. תראה לך מה הם מאחרים.
שמד"א ייתנו לי את הטיפול הכי טוב ויצא מזה כמה שיותר מהר, ואני סומך עליכם, ואם לא אתם לא הייתי כנראה ככה היום.
שמחה, באמת שמחה במקום שאני נמצאת בו, על האופציה שניתנה לי ועל האפשרות הזאת להגיע לפה היום.
אפרתי תישארי, אל תצאי עוד.
אוקיי.
אנחנו כמו כל עם ישראל, גאים בך.
הקבוצות, תחילה הקבוצה
Very touched by that, very moving, and makes me think I haven't been to a live football game for a while. So it's great that MDA could help this Israeli border guard who was he's been made disabled by a terrorist attack and fulfilling his dreams by going watching his beloved Maccabi Haifa play in their new stadium. Very touching, no doubt.
Absolutely, heartwarming to see that.
Excellent. So we're coming down towards the end of the programme, but before we do, I think also got an announcement to make regarding a possible trip that our viewers can make to Israel through MDA, and particularly for those of you who are more active, who want a challenge and would like to join MDA for a hiking trip to Israel from the 6th to the 13th of November, and that's hiking between Israel and Jordan, in terms of raising money for the excellent work of MDA UK. So
it's a great opportunity. I haven't done that trip. I don't think it requires you to be on kind of like super athletic level, but yes, it is a trek. You'll see some, amazing sights both in Jordan and Israel, and an opportunity really to see close up Magen David Adom doing its work across Israel. So it is a wonderful opportunity. I recently took a legacy trip which brought together both Jews and Christians, again taking a look at MDA close up in terms of its work. So it is a wonderful opportunity to see an aspect of Israel which on a usual holiday or even a pilgrim trip you would not see. This is seeing Israel in the raw, because Magen David Adom touches every element of Israeli society. Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Druze, secular. So you're going to see a whole cross-section. So it's an amazing opportunity, and I really hope people will take advantage of the MDA trek.
Absolutely. And how can our viewers watching this programme today, Stephen, help the work of MDA UK and also Christian Friends of MDA in helping to save lives in Israel?
Well, it's open to everyone. Everyone who has a heart for Israel, I'm sure, will want to get involved. There's a website, of course. I would encourage people to go on that. There's an opportunity to leave your email details so that you'll be on the mailing list, and we produce something called the Red Shield. Here in the UK, it goes out 4 times a year, and you'll get to hear both about the work of MDA in Israel and globally, but also about activities in the UK. We bring over speakers to speak in synagogues and churches, and hopefully that's just going to continue and get stronger as we move out of all the lockdown restrictions. So get on the mailing list, become aware. Obviously, donations are extremely welcome and appreciated. There is a facility to donate on the website, and I think it matters. I think this is an opportunity for Christians, I think, to witness their love for Israel, to an organisation which is in the mainstream of Israeli society, and as I've said, touches every aspect of that population. It's in the Jewish sector. It's, I've been to a Magen David Adom station in Sakhnin, which is an Arab town in northern Israel. When we were there, the volunteers who were working at that station were Muslim, Christian, and Jews, and some Druze as well. And it happened to be Ramadan, so the Muslims were not working during the day. They took the night shift, and the other people from other backgrounds were working during the day. Now, that is an aspect of Israeli society you'll never see in the BBC. That level of coexistence, of cooperation, it's real, it's true. I saw it with my own eyes. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us as Friends of Israel, Jewish or Christian, to stand together and show practical support. So those are various ways of getting involved.
And Stephen, like I said before in this programme as well, that MDA is more than just an ambulance service, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it is the heart of Israel. It's second only to the IDF in terms of the most loved and trusted brand within Israeli society. That says an awful lot about it. It's a volunteer organisation, so it's embedded in Israeli society. It's got that strategic importance that we've mentioned. It's everyday significance. You know, you and I visiting Israel, God forbid we might need the services of Magen David Adom, but it's there for us as well. So I think it sums up the very best of Israeli society. Its reach is global, so it's a light to the nations. I think it is a wonderful testimony of what Israel can achieve, and what we as friends living overseas, how we can contribute to something which is so mainstream in Israeli society.
And also what's very special as well is one of the few Jewish or Israeli organisations that have a strong Christian component within the organisation. So it's a partnership between Jews and Christians really in helping to save lives in Israel, Jewish lives, Christian lives, Arab lives, even the lives of terrorists who want to destroy and attack Israeli civilians. It's there for them as well, which is quite extraordinary because they don't make those political judgments.
It's a life-saving organisation, full stop. And you're right, the Christian Friends of Magen David Adom here in the UK, it's part and parcel of our organisation. And the work that they do has been outstanding for many years. And you can see the practical results of that in life-saving equipment across Israel. So it is, I think, bringing Jewish people, Christian people, everyone of goodwill together in a common purpose, which has as its aim standing with the Israeli people in something which is so needed and practical to them.
Absolutely. And also it's so important, isn't it, that our viewers watching now, when you have speaking engagements to come along and to speak to an MDA UK representative or representative from Christian Friends of Magen David Adom. So there is that connection with Israel through the incredible work being done by MDA and MDA UK.
So yes, it's a vehicle and a platform for that, and I think it can extend beyond its current reach. I think its humanitarian appeal is something which I think we should take to wider society. We should show this to people who might not consider themselves to be friends of Israel, but this shows Israel at its very best, and I think it's the fact that it's humanitarian, not political, is something which we can take to the wider population confidently and positively, because I think it is the very best of Israeli society.
Stephen, great to see you on the Middle East Report, and thank you so much for the work you do through MDA UK in saving lives in Israel. A fantastic organisation, it's got my full support. And I want to thank you for watching this programme at home. We need to pray, we need to support the incredible work being done by MDA and also MDA UK, together with Christian Friends of Magen David Adom, in saving lives in Israel, because this is a wonderful way to support Israel. This is a wonderful way to support the nation of Israel by saving lives and contributing to the incredible work that MDA is doing, especially the great news that Israel's new National Blood Centre has now been built and is operational. So thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.